Coruscant stands as the galactic capital, the seat of the Senate, home to the Jedi Temple, and the center of civilization for 25,000 years. But the Coruscant you see in the films only shows the surface, and the surface is hiding secrets that go down 5,000 levels deep. Over millennia of construction, the Republic built upward continuously, stacking new layers on top of old until the original planetary surface disappeared beneath artificial platforms kilometers thick. They created 5,127 distinct levels, and each level tells a different story. At the summit, senators debate in marble halls. In the middle levels, millions work in factories that never stop. In the depths, organized crime syndicates control entire districts that the Republic forgot centuries ago. At the very bottom, toxic air and collapsed ruins hide the foundations of everything built above. This video descends through every single level of Coruscant, from the Senate District on level 5127 down to the original planetary surface at level 0. I've gone through Canon and Legends sources to piece together the complete structure of the city planet. So, enjoy. Level 5127 represents the absolute summit of Coruscant's construction. This is the surface level, the only elevation on the entire planet where natural sunlight reaches the streets without filtering through thousands of levels of buildings above. During the final years of the Galactic Republic, all of Galactic City's most important structures existed at this elevation. The Senate Rotunda dominated the skyline, its massive dome sheltering representatives from 10,000 star systems who conducted the business of galactic governance. Nearby stood the Jedi Temple, 5 ancient spires that had served as headquarters of the Jedi Order for over 1,000 generations. But the surface level depended on the infrastructure hidden below. The Senate District occupies kilometers of territory on level 5127, featuring senatorial apartments and high-security complexes near the Senate building. Parks like the Gardens of Equality and Justice provide green space for senators between sessions. The district is protected by the blue-robed Senate guards, who stand watch at building entrances and delegate platforms. They breathe air that has not been recycled 5,000 times through filtration systems that should have been replaced decades ago. This level houses senators, diplomats, high-ranking government officials, and the extremely wealthy who can afford the astronomical cost of surface-level real estate. When the Galactic Empire replaced the Republic in 19 BBY, level 5127 transformed along with the government it hosted. The Compnor Arcology was constructed as a massive complex housing the Commission for the Preservation of the New Order and its propaganda apparatus. The Senate building remained standing but lost its legislative power as Emperor Palpatine consolidated authority. Meanwhile, the Jedi Temple became the Imperial Palace after Order 66 eliminated the Jedi, with its halls converted into administrative centers and Palpatine's personal residence. The surface level maintained its social functions throughout the Imperial era. Wealthy residents continued hosting events in penthouses while diplomats negotiated treaties. The level's high-end establishments operated without interruption despite the changing government. What made all of this possible lay 127 levels below. Level 5127's infrastructure depended entirely on Level 5000. Level 5000, situated just 127 levels below the surface, presents a stark contrast to the luxury above. While Level 5127 receives natural sunlight, Level 5000 operates without it, providing power for all levels above. This level houses Coruscant's central power distribution grid, featuring massive generators that produce enough energy to illuminate entire star systems if pointed in the right direction. The machinery operates continuously, producing a low-frequency hum audible throughout the entire level. The Clone Wars demonstrated how vital Level 5000 was to Coruscant's survival when Separatist infiltrator demolition droids, operating under General Grievous's orders, targeted the central power distribution generator. The strike destroyed machinery that had run continuously for centuries, triggering a cascade failure that spread across the grid within 2 minutes. Entire sectors of the upper city lost power instantly. Hospitals experienced life support failures, and traffic control networks went offline, sending speeders colliding into buildings across multiple districts. Within hours, the casualty count reached into the thousands, prompting the Senate to convene an emergency session that resulted in bank deregulation legislation, accelerated clone production, and further expanding Chancellor Palpatine's wartime authority. In Legends continuity, a separate incident involving the Star of Isken strike triggered the Enhanced Security and Enforcement Act through similar mechanisms, with both incidents serving to expand Palpatine's power. Level 5000 also explains Coruscant's numbering system. Higher numbers indicate higher altitudes. Level 1 sits at the bottom, built on the planet's actual surface before millennia of construction buried it, while level 5127 sits at the top, reaching into the stratosphere where the air grows thin. Everything in between was constructed over 25,000 years of continuous building. Level 5000 marks a boundary between the elite districts above and what Coruscant natives call the underlevel below, which operates under different social and economic conditions than the surface. The generators here run on fusion cores that could vaporize a city block if mishandled, so thousands of technicians work in rotating shifts, monitoring power flows and preventing meltdowns. They live in utilitarian housing blocks built directly into the generator infrastructure and rarely visit the surface levels. Yet, their work determines whether billions of beings above have light, heat, and air. The mid-4000 levels reveal the industrial infrastructure that sustained the upper city. Dropping into the 4000s, we leave behind the elite residential spires and enter the upper undercity, a middle band of older industrial zones, commercial districts, and government facilities that keep the machinery of civilization moving forward. Level 4888 exemplifies this zone. Imperial-era records describe it as a manufacturing district that produced everything from droid components to military uniforms around the clock. The factories operate continuously, staffed by beings who have never seen actual daylight and never will during their entire lives. During the Clone Wars, these facilities produced equipment for the Grand Army of the Republic at a pace that would have been impossible without automation and 3-shift rotations. After the Empire took control, they switched to producing stormtrooper armor and TIE fighter components without missing a single production quota. The machinery does not care who wins the conflict or what ideology drives the orders. It keeps running, fed by workers who understand that stopping means losing their jobs to someone more desperate. Level 4643 appears in bureaucratic records, but little else. Mentioned in shipping manifests and transit logs, the kind of level that exists but does not matter to anyone important enough to remember it. Warehouse districts like this stretch for kilometers in every direction, storing goods that will be shipped to 1,000 worlds. Cargo speeders move through enclosed highways, hauling containers from landing bays to distribution centers, transporting products that keep the galaxy's economy flowing while the haulers earn enough credits to avoid starvation. Small cantinas operate in alcoves between warehouses, serving shift workers, while families live in compact apartments carved into old factory buildings. The numbering system reveals something crucial about Coruscant's structure. Level 3204, known as the Alderaanian district, demonstrates how mid-levels function during the Republic's height. Alderaanian expatriates constructed an entire neighborhood here, recreating their homeworld's architecture in miniature despite the astronomical cost and engineering challenges. The district featured towers built in Alderaanian architectural style, alongside artificial gardens where specially treated plants grew under UV lamps that simulated Alderaan's sun. The district thrived for centuries, hosting diplomats and artists who wanted a taste of their homeworld without leaving the capital. Then, the Death Star destroyed Alderaan in 0 BBY, and the district transformed overnight into a memorial, a ghost neighborhood where survivors gathered to mourn a homeworld they could never see again. The Empire sealed off the district temporarily, claiming it required investigation, but the real concern was the grief and rage building in the streets. Eventually, the district reopened, but it was never the same. The gardens fell into disrepair, and the buildings stood empty. After the Empire's fall, the fate of Level 3204 remains undocumented in official records. Below 3000, Coruscant's entertainment districts begin. These levels sprawl across kilometers, offering gambling, clubs, and various legal and illegal experiences. Holographic billboards tower 5 stories high, advertising shows and establishments, and the streets operate continuously since no natural day-night cycle exists this far from the surface. But not everyone who entered these entertainment districts came looking for pleasure. The Uscrew Entertainment District on the upper end of this zone became notable during the Republic's final days. Jedi sometimes walked these crowded streets, pursuing bounty hunters or tracking separatist agents through masses of pleasure seekers who did not want to know about galactic politics. Anakin Skywalker chased the shapeshifter Zam Wesell through Uscrew's airways in 22 BBY during the final days of the Republic before the Clone Wars began, dodging traffic while she fled toward the Outlander Club and whatever safety she thought waited there. When he finally caught her in an alley behind a cantina, she fell, attempting to reveal warnings about a plot bigger than anyone imagined. The Outlander Club deserves special mention in any discussion of Coruscant's entertainment culture. This massive establishment sprawled across multiple sublevels, offering gambling, drinks, and end sticks to anyone with credits to spend and discretion to forget what they saw. Inside, a dozen species mingled in the main room while music played continuously. The crowd mixed in ways that would be impossible on the surface. Laborers spending their week's wages, senators slumming for thrills they could not find in legal establishments, smugglers making deals that would never appear in official records, and Jedi hunting leads that might prevent the next crisis. Contraband changed hands in dark corners away from the main floor, while beings exchanged information for payment, understanding that information held more value than gold when used properly. In Attack of the Clones, Obi-Wan Kenobi used a Jedi mind trick on end-stick dealer Ilan Selsabagno here. According to supplementary material, Selsabagno did rethink his life afterward, opening a legitimate fruit business. Further down in the entertainment districts, the Outlander Club was just one establishment among thousands competing for attention. The galaxy's Opera House sat in the district's heart, hosting performances that drew audiences from across the galaxy. The entertainment districts also contained Coruscant's underworld justice system. Level 2623 presents another face of Coruscant that the tourism holovids never mention: justice, underworld style. This level houses detention facilities, prisons built into the city's skeleton, where beings who break the law are stored until someone decides what to do with them. When security forces arrest someone in the lower levels, they do not haul them all the way up to the surface for processing. Too much trouble, too much risk of escape, too much paperwork explaining why a prisoner slipped away during transport. Instead, they place offenders in detention blocks like the one on level 2623, where cells are carved into solid duracrete, and the only light comes from force fields securing the cells. During the High Republic era, over 300 years before the Clone Wars, authorities arrested the intoxicated Toydarian on level 1392 for disturbing the peace. They dragged him down to a detention block on level 2623 to sober up and contemplate his poor life choice, a journey that started 1,392 levels from the planetary core, dropped another 1,231 levels down to his cell, where he would spend the next few days regretting every decision that led to that moment. This single arrest illustrates how Coruscant handles lawbreaking at different altitudes. The upper levels receive courts, lawyers, and due process that can drag on for months, while the lower levels receive a cell on level 2623 until authorities decide the prisoner is no longer worth the trouble, then release them back onto the streets with a warning that will not stick. These detention levels serve purposes beyond simple punishment, functioning as staging areas where dangerous lawbreakers wait while investigators figure out what to do with them. Some prisoners get transferred upward for formal trials that might result in justice. Others are released due to overcrowding because authorities could not be bothered to process them properly, and some simply disappear into the system, lost in the bureaucracy of a planet with over 1 trillion inhabitants, where keeping track of everyone is impossible. On Coruscant, it's easy to vanish if not important enough for anyone to remember. Level 2046 offers a glimpse of ordinary life in the mid-levels during the Empire's reign. This level housed a community of workers who kept Coruscant's systems running without ever receiving credit for their essential labor. They repaired atmospheric processors that recycled the air everyone breathed, maintained water distribution systems that delivered clean water to billions of homes above them, and cleaned waste recycling plants that no one wanted to think about, but everyone depended on daily. Despite its importance, this essential maintenance work received little recognition. A thriving market operated on level 2046 despite the challenging economic conditions, with shops selling everything from replacement parts to fresh food, though produce quality varied after being shipped through 5,000 levels of the city. One establishment, Desi's Noodles, became a local landmark by operating across multiple levels and serving cheap meals to workers, specializing in a synthetic noodle dish that cost barely a credit and provided enough calories for an 8-hour shift. But even these modest lives came under pressure as the Empire tightened its grip on every aspect of Coruscant society. Imperial officers started running protection rackets on level 2046, demanding regular payments in exchange for security services that everyone understood as threats. Stormtroopers would walk into shops, lean against counters, and casually mention that maintaining order was not free, and accidents happened to businesses that did not contribute to community safety. Many shop owners paid because they understood the alternative. Some resisted out of principle or pride. Those who resisted discovered their businesses mysteriously burned down, or their suppliers suddenly refused to deliver goods for reasons they would not explain. By the late Imperial period, level 2046 was perishing slowly from systematic exploitation. Shops closed prematurely, and families moved away seeking opportunities elsewhere, or descended to even cheaper levels where rent was affordable. The meatpacking plant that employed hundreds shut down after Imperial inspectors declared it unsanitary, despite it passing the same inspections for decades under the Republic, because the real reason was simpler and more corrupt. The plant owner refused to pay bribes to officials who controlled the inspection process. This pattern of Imperial extortion repeated across thousands of levels throughout the Empire's reign, systematically suppressing local businesses and communities. Below level 2000, the city becomes something else entirely. Natural light does not reach these levels, which means residents live their entire lives without seeing sunlight. The air is stale, recycled through ancient filtration systems so many times that it carries a metallic taste, while buildings press together, leaving only narrow passages for streets. Meanwhile, the infrastructure shows visible strain, sagging durasteel beams, walls bulging under pressure, and cracks sealed with temporary foam. These levels form the structural foundation that supports everything above, with infrastructure, support beams, power conduits, ventilation systems, keeping the upper levels functioning. Yet law enforcement rarely patrols these areas. They come in armored convoys when they absolutely have to, when a situation on a lower level threatens to spread upward where important people might notice. Then leave as fast as possible because every moment spent down here is a moment where something might go wrong. The gangs understand this dynamic and control these levels through force. Their territorial control operates openly without any pretense of legitimacy. Level 1782 earned its reputation as an endless junkyard, a place where Coruscant dumps its mistakes and broken things. Crashed speeders pile in heaps 5 stories high, their twisted metal frames forming unstable piles of debris that shift without warning, while broken droids rust in scattered pieces with their valuable parts scavenged by whomever arrived first. Old building materials, outdated technology, Discarded furniture from upper-level homes, all of it ends up here, accumulating over decades of dumping from upper levels. But people live here despite the dangers and squalor. They carve homes into the scrap heaps, welding together shelters from starship hulls and sheet metal salvaged from demolished buildings. They hunt through the junk for salvageable components, selling anything valuable to dealers who come down from upper levels looking for deals on parts they can resell for profit. It's a dangerous existence where unstable towers of debris collapse without warning, crushing anyone underneath. Toxic runoff pools in low spots, corroding metal and flesh alike, creating zones where nothing can survive for long. Feral droids wander the heaps, their programming corrupted by years without maintenance, attacking anything that moves because their threat recognition subroutines cannot tell friend from foe anymore. Yet communities have formed on level 1782. Scavengers develop territories and hierarchies based on who controls the best salvage spots. The best locations, areas where upper-level contractors regularly dump valuable technology, are claimed by gangs who defend their turf through conflict when necessary. Smaller operators work the margins, hoping to find valuable salvage that will allow them to relocate to a higher level. Children born on level 1782 grow up in salvage communities, learning to recognize valuable salvage before they learn to read or write. This existence is all they know. Life beyond these heaps of garbage remains unimaginable to them, including levels where the ground is solid and buildings stay standing for more than a few years without collapsing. One story tells of a Herdlick informant who directed fugitives to hide on level 1782, reasoning correctly that no one would search a literal trash heap for escaped prisoners. He was right. The fugitives disappeared into the scrap heaps and were never found. Moving deeper into the Underworld, the levels reveal how far the Republic's control had truly slipped. Level 1671 sits 3,456 levels from the surface, roughly two-thirds of the way down through Coruscant's urban crust. This level's reputation for criminality stretches back to the final years of the Republic, before the Clone Wars began. In 26 BBY, Lieutenant Tanavos Devo of the Coruscant Security Force raided an arms deal here that made his career and nearly ended his life. The target was Zodu Onglo, a Palawan gunrunner with connections across the Underworld and enough cunning to have avoided capture for years. Onglo specialized in moving stolen military-grade weapons, selling them to whoever paid his price without caring what they planned to use the blasters for afterward. On that night, he arranged a deal in a warehouse on level 1671, planning to sell a cache of weapons lifted from a Republic armory to buyers who definitely should not have access to military hardware. Devo's intelligence network tipped him off about the transaction. The lieutenant assembled a strike team and moved in as credits were changing hands and the buyers were inspecting their new merchandise. The resulting firefight illuminated 3 blocks in every direction. Onglo's guards opened fire the instant they spotted badges, not waiting for anyone to announce they were under arrest. Devo's team returned fire immediately, pinning the lawbreakers behind cargo containers while calling for backup that might arrive too late to matter. The warehouse itself was a maze of storage crates and dark corners, perfect terrain for an ambush or a last stand. For 20 minutes, blaster bolts crisscrossed the space, sparking off Durasteel support beams and punching through the cheap corrugated metal walls. Then, Devo flanked the defenders through a ventilation shaft no one was watching, coming up behind them through the darkness and catching them completely by surprise. Onglo surrendered when he felt a blaster pressed against the back of his head and realized his situation had become hopeless. Devo's case report describes level 1671 as a hostile zone where standard law enforcement procedures do not apply. Officers operate surrounded by beings who view them as invaders. The report notes that without proper backup and heavy weapons, entering level 1671 results in casualties. This case file reveals how the Republic viewed its own lower levels. Even before the Clone Wars and the Empire's rise, Coruscant had lost control of huge swaths of the Underworld, where outlaws operated openly and law enforcement only intervened when crimes affected upper levels or someone important demanded action. The 1300s contain the levels that define Coruscant's underworld in popular imagination. The 1300s, especially level 1313, define Coruscant's illicit underworld. These levels are well known in the lower city, but largely unknown on the surface, attracting those seeking to operate outside Republic or Imperial law. Level 1313 sits 1,313 levels up from the planetary core, deep enough that Coruscant's polite society forgot it existed centuries ago. During the Clone Wars, most citizens on the upper levels did not know there was a level 1313, as it was not part of their awareness. The Jedi knew about it due to lawbreakers fleeing to these depths, but did not publicize its existence. The level's architecture reveals its age through every crumbling surface. Buildings here date back thousands of years, constructed during Coruscant's early urban expansion when the city still had open ground and natural sky. Structures that were never meant to be buried under 5,000 levels of newer construction, but were instead streets and buildings originally constructed on the surface before being buried. But the city built upward continuously, leaving these old districts in permanent darkness. The buildings lean against each other for support, with foundations settling unevenly. Walkways sag under the weight they were not designed to carry, and mold grows on most surfaces due to moisture and poor ventilation. Ahsoka Tano learned about 1313 the hard way when she had nowhere else to run. Falsely accused of attacking the Jedi Temple in 20 BBY, she fled to the Underworld to escape Republic forces who thought she was an extremist. With nowhere else to turn and no one to trust, she descended to 1313, hoping to lose herself in the crowds where Jedi rarely ventured. Gangs controlled the streets and demanded tribute. Every transaction required credits and favors, and finding food meant navigating local loyalties and debts unfamiliar to someone raised in the Jedi Temple. She met the Martez sisters, Trace and Rafa, in a repair shop on 1313, where they struggled to keep a legitimate business running. These two young women had been born on 1313 and never left. They were not lawbreakers by choice, but were simply trying to survive in an environment that punished honest business practices. To them, the Jedi were distant figures who never came to the lower levels. When Ahsoka revealed she was a Jedi, they initially did not believe her. The Martez sisters had their own problems that went beyond poverty. They owed money to a gangster named Pintu Sunel, a Quarren enforcer who controlled several blocks of 1313 through fear and casual cruelty. Sunel ran a protection racket that was anything but protective. Pay him or suffer accidents that would destroy everything you worked for. The sisters could not pay, so their options were brutally simple. Work for Sunel, doing jobs they would hate themselves for, flee Coruscant entirely with nothing but what they could carry, or refuse and perish when his patience ran out. Ahsoka's arrival complicated everything because her presence brought danger that the sisters could not handle. When gangsters from the Pike Syndicate showed up looking for the fugitive Jedi, the Martez sisters got caught in the crossfire that was not their fight. Eventually, Ahsoka and the sisters escaped 1313 together, flying off-world in a cargo ship they barely knew how to pilot. For Ahsoka, it was a temporary stop on a journey toward clearing her name and finding justice. For Trace and Rafa, it was freedom from a life they had been born into and never escaped through any legitimate path. Most beings on 1313 spend their entire lives there without ever reaching the surface levels. According to Legends sources, level 1313 was planned to play an even larger role in Star Wars storytelling. LucasArts announced Star Wars 1313 in 2012 as a video game focusing on Coruscant's illicit underworld, and a live-action TV series titled Star Wars Underworld would have used the same settings. Though both projects were canceled after Disney's acquisition of Lucasfilm, concepts survived in various forms. The Star Wars The Essential Reader's Companion describes Boba Fett investigating underworld networks on 1313 during the Empire's reign. hunting bounties through the lower levels where Imperial law had limited reach. Meanwhile, Dr. Evazan and Ponda Baba, the Cantina thugs who later confronted Luke Skywalker and Mos Eisley, fled through 1313 1 year before A New Hope, pursued by Coruscant police after a botched medical experiment. The level's darkness is not metaphorical. Broken lighting systems leave entire blocks in shadow, lit only by neon signs advertising clubs, cantinas, and less legal enterprises, while moisture drips constantly from overhead pipes, pooling in low spots and growing fungus that clings to every surface it touches. Fungus grows on most surfaces, thriving on organic material that accumulates in the lower levels. Yet despite everything working against them, life persists. Clubs on 1313 host dancers and musicians, and families raise children in apartments carved into ancient buildings, teaching them to survive in a hostile world that is the only home they will ever know. The levels surrounding 1313 each tell their own stories of survival and betrayal. Level 1312 attracted a different kind of illicit, those who needed to stay hidden rather than operate openly. One level up from 1313, the level shares many characteristics with its infamous neighbor. Dim streets lit by failing glow panels, gang presence on every corner, businesses struggling to stay legitimate in an economy that rewards corruption, but with slightly less chaos moment to moment. That small difference mattered to people looking for a place to hide where they might survive longer than a week. Asajj Ventress lived on 1312 for a time after leaving Count Dooku's service and everything the Sith represented. The former assassin turned bounty hunter needed a base of operations, off the grid, where neither Jedi nor Sith would think to look for someone with her particular skills. The corner of 12th and G on level 1312 fit perfectly for her needs. A numbered intersection in a numbered grid, anonymous and forgotten by anyone who mattered. So, she rented a small apartment, paid in untraceable credits that could not be tracked to their source, and operated from there for months without incident. When Ahsoka Tano fled to the Underworld during her fugitive arc, she ended up at the same intersection by pure chance or the Force's guidance. She did not know about Ventress's residence. She needed a public holobooth to make a call, and 12th and G had one that still worked, unlike most of the vandalized equipment scattered across the level. Standing in that booth, surrounded by the noise and chaos that never stopped on 1312, Ahsoka contacted Barriss Offee, not knowing Barriss had betrayed her. The fact that both Ventress and Ahsoka ended up on the same corner tells us something important about the Underworld's geography. Safe spaces are rare at this depth. The few locations with working communication equipment or quiet rooms are used repeatedly by different people hiding from different threats. Level 1315, 3 levels up, hosted abandoned warehouses left over from the Republic's earlier industrial era, buildings empty and forgotten by everyone except outlaws who needed space to store contraband away from official eyes, making them perfect for storing illegal goods, evidence of conspiracy, or traps designed to destroy a young Jedi's life and reputation. Barriss Offee chose a mutinous warehouse on 1315 as her base when she turned against the Jedi Order she had once served. The warehouse held crates of nanodroids, banned weapons from the Clone Wars that could slip through security scanners and destroy systems from within buildings that seemed completely safe. Barriss had used these weapons to strike the Jedi Temple, taking lives and destroying property while framing Ahsoka for crimes she did not commit. Now, Barriss hid in the warehouse's depths, planning her next move, while the Jedi searched for evidence that would prove Ahsoka's guilt and justify their rush to judgment. Ahsoka and Ventress tracked her there through investigation and intuition. They had formed an unlikely alliance, the falsely accused Padawan and the notorious assassin, working together because the truth mattered more than their past conflicts. When they reached the warehouse at 1315, they found it brightly lit, with the constant clatter of machinery echoing through the space. With crates stacked 20 feet high, creating a maze where Barriss waited with stolen lightsabers. The confrontation was brief and brutal when it finally came. Barriss ambushed them from above, leaping from a catwalk with lightsabers blazing red, but they were not her lightsabers. She had stolen Ventress's weapons, dual crimson blades that deceived onlookers into believing a Sith was present. Ahsoka and Barriss clashed among the munitions crates, lightsabers carving through metal containers and support beams. Then, Barriss played her final move with ruthless precision. She knocked Ahsoka unconscious with a calculated strike and scattered nanodroid evidence around her unconscious body, creating a scene that looked exactly like an extremist caught with incriminating materials. When clone troopers burst into the warehouse moments later, responding to anonymous tips, they found exactly what they expected: Ahsoka surrounded by incriminating evidence, while Barriss had vanished into the darkness. The arrest on Level 1315 led directly to Ahsoka's trial and expulsion from the Jedi Order. Though she was eventually cleared after the truth emerged, the damage could not be undone. She left the Jedi Order, and the events leading to her departure began in an abandoned warehouse on Level 1315. Level 1315 remained active in Imperial records long after the Clone Wars ended. Security reports note suspicious activity on Level 1315 as a routine entry in daily logs, suggesting illicit operations continued for decades in warehouses that no one bothered to demolish or repurpose for legitimate use. The Clone Wars turned these forgotten levels into stages for personal tragedies that shaped galactic history. Level 1325, 10 levels up from 1315, witnessed another tragedy that the Clone Wars inflicted on those who tried to do the right thing. ARC Trooper CT-5555, known to his brothers as Fives, discovered the truth about Order 66 through investigation and terrible luck. He learned about the inhibitor chips planted in every clone trooper's brain, bioorganic devices designed to turn loyal soldiers into Jedi executioners at Palpatine's command. Fives knew he had to warn someone who could stop the conspiracy, but he needed to find someone he could trust, despite the conspiracy reaching the highest levels of government. He chose Anakin Skywalker and Captain Rex, two beings he believed would listen and act on evidence, even if it implicated the Chancellor himself. Fives arranged a secret meeting on Level 1325, Sector I-9, in a hangar bay far from prying eyes and surveillance systems that reported everything to Palpatine's network. He picked this level deliberately for strategic reasons, deep enough that Senate security would not patrol without a specific reason, but accessible enough that Anakin could reach it without raising suspicion from handlers who watched his movements. In that hangar, Fives presented his evidence about the inhibitor chips and their purpose. He explained the conspiracy to Anakin and Rex, who began to believe his account, despite how impossible it sounded. Then, Coruscant's security burst through the hangar doors, responding to a tip from Palpatine's agents. In the chaos and confusion that followed, a security officer struck Fives. He perished in Rex's arms moments later, attempting to warn them about the Chancellor and the chips, but he failed to convey the full message as he fell, leaving Palpatine's plan unopposed. Fives fell on Level 1325, in a hangar that was unmarked and cleaned by security droids within hours. Even in these depths where tragedy struck daily, the Underworld's economy continued operating. Level 1329, 4 levels down from 1325, is home to Uret's Mark, a bar with a well-earned reputation as one of the roughest establishments on one of the roughest levels in Coruscant's underworld. That is a claim on a planet where thousands of levels compete for the title of roughest, but Uret's Mark earned every word through consistent service to the galaxy's underworld element and those who hunted them. During the Age of the Empire, Han Solo and Chewbacca spent a week on Level 1329 looking for work that would pay better than their usual smuggling runs. They had arrived on Coruscant hoping to score a lucrative cargo job through connections in the trade guilds, but legitimate opportunities were scarce for known smugglers whose reputations preceded them. So, they descended to the underworld, where nobody asked questions and deals were sealed with handshakes backed by the implicit threat of conflict if anyone broke their word. Uret's Mark became their base of operations during that week, a place to drink cheap ale, eat cheaper food, and wait for the right job to materialize from the stream of outlaws passing through. The bar served fried Nerf nuggets, greasy, salty, and surprisingly edible despite questionable origins. Chewbacca developed a taste for them that Han could not understand, downing plates of the fried meat between drinks of Corellian ale and watching the crowd for opportunities or threats. Han nursed his own drinks slowly, evaluating potential employers and dangers with equal caution, because in places like Uret's Mark, everyone was both. Their week on level 1329 culminated in a meeting with Alinka Alu, an imperial noblewoman who needed discreet transportation for reasons she would not explain beyond vague references to family business. Han smelled trouble immediately. He always did when jobs came with secrets and nervous clients, but he needed credits badly enough to ignore his instincts. The job went sideways exactly as he'd predicted, but that is a different story. What matters is that level 1329 facilitated connections that could not happen anywhere else in the galaxy. If Alu had tried hiring smugglers through legitimate channels, she would have been reported to Imperial intelligence within hours by informants who sold information for a steady income. But down on level 1329, in a dive bar where everyone was guilty of something, she could make her deal in relative peace. Uret's Mark also featured regular brawls that were not planned entertainment. Spontaneous conflict erupted when someone insulted the wrong being or cheated at sabak against someone who did not accept losing gracefully. Below the 1300s, conditions deteriorate beyond what most beings consider survivable. In these levels, Coruscant's conditions become significantly more hazardous. This threshold is not officially marked, but it is recognized by Underworld residents. Above it, the lower levels are dangerous but functional, while below it, infrastructure failures and environmental hazards make the levels largely uninhabitable. The levels down here are so old that their construction predates recorded history by thousands of years. The buildings have deteriorated into ruins that remain unstudied due to dangerous conditions, and systems fail in ways that cannot be repaired because no one remembers how they work or what they were supposed to do. The air itself becomes a hazard, growing thinner and more toxic with each level descended, which is why official records list these levels as uninhabitable due to toxic air, structural instability, and other environmental hazards. Yet legends persist about what exists in the deepest levels. Spacers tell stories around cantina tables about mutant creatures lurking in the perpetual darkness below level 100, while urban explorers share rumors of lost treasures buried in collapsed buildings where no one has walked for 10,000 years. Conspiracy theorists insist that secret Imperial facilities operated in these depths, conducting experiments that could not be allowed on the surface world, where witnesses might ask inconvenient questions. Some of these stories have a basis in fact, though verification is difficult without expeditions into hazardous areas. Most citizens believe they know where Coruscant City ends. They are wrong. Level 5 represents the official floor of habitable Coruscant in most citizens' understanding. Most upper-level residents believe it is the lowest accessible level, and most people never think about the question because they live their entire lives between levels 1000 and 5127, never considering what lies beneath their feet or why it matters. Princess Leia Organa believed level 5 was the bottom, until her friend Amilyn Holdo corrected her during one of their youthful adventures. Young Leia, full of confidence and privilege that came from being raised in palaces, stated with absolute certainty that level 5 was as low as anyone could go. Holdo challenged the assumption, asking where that information came from. Leia's answer, that everyone knew it, revealed the limits of common knowledge even among the galaxy's educated elite. Everyone was wrong about something basic because they had never questioned what they were told, and Holdo delighted in proving it. Level 5 is characterized by deteriorating infrastructure and minimal services. The buildings are utilitarian blocks built during Coruscant's first major expansion thousands of years ago, designed for function over form. They are solid durasteel and duraplast construction, built to last for centuries, and they have succeeded far beyond their creators' expectations. People live here out of necessity rather than choice, scraping by in the cheapest housing on the entire planet. The level attracts the desperately poor and those hiding from debts or warrants that would catch up with them on higher levels, where records are checked more carefully. Basic services exist on Level 5, but they are unreliable in ways that cost lives when systems fail. Water comes from pipes that should have been replaced centuries ago. Power arrives through junction boxes that spark whenever demand exceeds capacity. And air processing works most of the time, which means sometimes it does not, and residents wake up gasping because the recyclers broke down during the night. Outages happen regularly enough that residents keep emergency supplies and backup plans, knowing they might go days without services that upper-level citizens take completely for granted. The population of Level 5 lives one level above Level 4, which is officially forbidden, and 2 levels above Level 3, which is sealed entirely. The levels below Level 5 exist in official records only as warnings and restricted zones. Young Leia learned that everyone was wrong in the most direct way possible when Amilyn Holdo decided they should explore Level 4 during one of their adventures together. The official records said it was inaccessible, sealed off for safety reasons that no one bothered to explain beyond vague warnings about structural instability. But Holdo took that as a challenge rather than a deterrent, because telling her something could not be done was the surest way to make her do it. She found maintenance shafts that led down into the forbidden level, access tunnels that had not been sealed properly, and weak points in the barriers that kept ordinary citizens from descending. With Leia in tow, reluctant but curious despite her better judgment, Holdo descended into Level 4, carrying nothing but a flashlight and determination to prove something everyone knew was wrong. The level had no functioning lighting systems, so Holdo's flashlight revealed crumbling architecture and thick dust that made breathing difficult, while the structures showed visible signs of settling under the weight of the levels above with unstable floors and ceilings. Despite the hazards, Holdo searched for the museum she had heard about that supposedly contained artifacts from Coruscant's earliest history. She found it tucked into a forgotten corner of Level 4, a building that predated the Republic by thousands of years. It had been a museum once, hosting artifacts from Coruscant's early history when the planet still had oceans and forests and species that were not human. Now, it stood abandoned and sealed for centuries. Display cases held objects that no one alive remembered the purpose of anymore, while sculptures depicted species that might be extinct or might have evolved into something else. Text plaques explained exhibits in languages that required translation software to read, and even then, the meanings came through garbled and uncertain. Holdo and Leia explored the museum's halls, which contained artifacts from civilizations that predated the Republic. The experience demonstrated that Coruscant's construction had buried entire eras of history beneath newer levels. Levels 2 and 3 remained sealed not just for safety, but for secrets the Empire wanted buried. Below Level 4 lie Levels 3 and 2, officially sealed and designated as completely inaccessible to anyone without special authorization, which is almost impossible to obtain. Security barriers block every known entrance with redundant systems, while droids patrol the few maintenance shafts that descend this far, programmed to turn back anyone who tries to enter and report their attempt to authorities. The official reason given in public records is safety. These levels are structurally unsound, prone to collapse, filled with toxic gases that are fatal within minutes, and devoid of anything worth salvaging. The unofficial reason that circulates in conspiracy theories is much darker. The Empire did not want anyone discovering what was down there. Unverified rumors describe secret facilities on Levels 2 and 3 that operated during the Imperial era. Scientific installations where forbidden experiments took place away from oversight committees, detention centers for political prisoners who were too dangerous to execute but too important to release, and archives containing records the Empire wanted destroyed, but could not bring itself to delete because information might become useful again. Whether these rumors contain any truth, or whether they are paranoid fantasies, is impossible to verify without breaching the barriers, and no one who has tried has come back with evidence that settles the question. Some beings did enter, despite the barriers and warnings. Urban explorers and treasure hunters risked everything to descend into the sealed zone, driven by curiosity or greed, or the belief that things forbidden must contain something valuable. A few returned with tales of empty corridors and collapsed structures. Nothing exciting, nothing worth the risk they had taken, while others returned disoriented, unable to clearly describe what they had encountered. Some never returned at all and were reported missing, with Coruscant security investigations finding no leads and the cases being filed as lost to unknown causes. The actual conditions on levels 2 and 3 likely consist of collapsed buildings, toxic leaks, industrial runoff, and possibly feral creatures adapted to the darkness. The lack of verified information has allowed speculation to persist. At the very bottom lies the foundation upon which 25,000 years of civilization were built. Level 1 was the first artificial platform ever built on Coruscant, and now it would end anyone who tried to breathe its air. Constructed over 100,000 years ago, when the planet still had open ground, natural sky, and species living without needing to recycle their air through filtration systems, early settlers, whose names are lost to time, built this level as the foundation for everything that would come after, making decisions that would shape galactic civilization in ways they could never have predicted. They laid down durasteel beams kilometers long and poured duraplast foundations strong enough to support entire city blocks, creating a platform that could hold buildings, streets, and populations measured in millions without collapsing under its own weight. Construction continued upward for 100,000 years as the population grew and available surface area filled. By the time of the Galactic Republic, construction had buried Level 1 under 5,126 additional levels of construction. No natural light reached it anymore, and no fresh air circulated through its ancient corridors. The structures that made up Level 1 had endured for millennia beyond their design parameters, held together by construction methods that are no longer fully understood. Most had collapsed eventually, or been deliberately demolished to make room for supports needed by the levels above. What remained was a wasteland of ancient ruins, more archaeological site than functioning city, preserved only because removing it was more trouble than leaving it alone. The official designation for Level 1 in modern records is uninhabitable, and this time there is no ambiguity about what that means. Multiple surveys over the centuries confirmed that oxygen levels are insufficient to support most forms of life, with the air being a toxic mixture of chemicals leached from decaying construction materials and industrial waste that filtered down over 100,000 years of urban existence. Radiation levels exceeded safe limits because of ancient power systems that were never properly decommissioned, making exploration dangerous even with full environmental suits. Without protection, exposure proves fatal within minutes. Yet Level 1 fascinates scholars who study Coruscant's transformation from planet to ecumenopolis. It represents the beginning of the project covering an entire world and cities, and in the ruins are clues to who the original builders were and why they started this process that consumed everything natural. Beneath Level 1 lies Coruscant's original planetary surface. Level 0 is exactly what the name suggests, the ground level of Coruscant, the planet's original surface, now buried beyond any reasonable hope of reaching it again. This is the original planetary surface where life first evolved billions of years ago. Ancient oceans, shores, and mountains once existed here before construction filled and leveled them. All natural features have been erased, and only archaeological surveys and deep core samples can verify that they ever existed. According to fragmentary records from early surveys, Level 0 receives no illumination from above through 5,000 levels of construction. The only light sources are bioluminescent fungi and chemical reactions in pools of toxic waste, while the temperature remains cold due to the absence of sunlight and the thermal properties of rock that has not been warmed in over 100,000 years. Water exists only as seepage through cracks, contaminated with heavy metals and pollutants. The environment is classified as actively hostile to life. Coruscant is classified as an ecumenopolis, a planet entirely covered by a city. The original planetary surface at Level 0 has been buried under artificial construction for over 100,000 years. One persistent myth claims that mutated creatures live below Level 100, things that evolved in the darkness over thousands of years and have never seen light in their entire evolutionary history. These creatures supposedly hunt by sound and smell alone, preying on explorers who descend too far.